The doors of the Concord Hall slammed shut behind me, and every eye in that massive chamber turned toward the sound. My hands were still shaking from the walk through the security scanners, the kind that read your heartbeat and your fear at the same time. I was the only human in a room built for giants, for beings who had been flying between stars while my ancestors were still learning to make fire. I found my seat at the lowest tier, the one reserved for what the other delegates called minor species. A silver plaque in front of me read the word Earth in 6 alien scripts, and under it, someone had carved a small symbol that I later learned meant temporary guest. Not permanent, not equal, just tolerated. I sat down and tried to breathe normally. Around me, the Dravith ambassadors whispered in their clicking language. The old Kesh, tall and pale, did not look at me at all. I was used to that. Humanity had only joined this Concord 8 months earlier, after we proved we would not attack anyone who left us alone. That was the whole reason I was here, to keep proving it, one boring meeting at a time. Then the horns sounded, low and long, shaking the floor under my boots. Every delegate in the hall rose at once, a wave of bodies standing in perfect unison, like they had rehearsed it 1,000 times. I stood too, half a second late, because nobody had told me what the horns meant. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened, and the room went from noisy to silent in the space of one breath. She walked in alone, no guards beside her, no advisors whispering in her ear, nothing but her own footsteps echoing across the marble floor. She was tall, taller than most in the room, with skin that shimmered faintly like water catching light, and eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies inside them. I did not need anyone to tell me who she was. Every species in that hall had legends about the Exathene Queen, the ruler of a civilization so old that some believed her people had watched the first stars ignite. She was supposed to walk straight to the throne platform at the center of the hall. That was the protocol. I had read the briefing twice on the shuttle ride over, because getting protocol wrong in this place could end a species' entire diplomatic standing. She did not walk to the throne. Her eyes moved across the crowded rows, past kings and generals and ambassadors who had waited years for an audience with her, and they landed on me, on the empty, unimportant seat marked Earth. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. I actually turned my head to check if there was someone important standing behind me. There was no one, just a wall. She started walking again, but this time toward me, and the sound of her boots on the marble was the only sound left in that enormous room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I saw a Dravith general's hand twitch toward a weapon at his belt, then freeze, because even he did not know what was happening. I stood frozen in place as the most powerful being in the galaxy crossed an entire hall just to reach me. When she stopped in front of me, she was close enough that I could see her eyes were wet, glistening with something that looked almost like relief. Then she reached out and took both of my hands in hers, and her voice cracked as she spoke words that would end up changing everything. Finally, I remember you. I did not understand. I had never met this woman in my life. I would have remembered meeting a queen who could apparently silence an entire galactic hall just by walking into it. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. She smiled through what looked like tears, and said my name, my actual first name, the one only my closest friends used, not my formal title, not my delegate designation. Just my name, spoken like it was something precious she had been searching for across years and stars. Then she began to explain, right there, in front of every delegate in the Concord, and the hall listened like it was made of stone. 6 years earlier, before humanity had even discovered faster-than-light travel, before we knew alien civilizations existed at all, I had been part of a small research crew stationed on an ice moon at the edge of our own solar system, studying strange energy readings that our scientists could not explain. One night during a routine patrol, my scanner picked up something that should not have existed. A ship buried under the ice, ancient and broken, leaking radiation that was slowly poisoning everything around it. Inside that wreck, we found a survivor. A woman with no memory of who she was, burned and frozen and barely alive, speaking a language none of our translators could process. My crew wanted to leave her, worried about contamination, worried about protocol we did not even have yet, because nobody on Earth had ever handled first contact before. I refused. I carried her out myself, wrapped her in my own thermal coat, and stayed beside her for 3 days straight while our medical team fought to keep her alive. She had no memory then. Whatever crash had brought her to that ice moon had wiped her mind clean, along with any record of who she truly was. My crew tried to figure out where she came from, but there were no answers, no ships responding, nothing. Eventually, unknown vessels arrived, retrieved her, and left without a single word of explanation. My superiors ordered the entire incident classified. I was told to forget it ever happened, and after enough years passed with no follow-up, I mostly did. I never knew her name. I never knew what she was. I certainly never imagined she was the ruler of one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Standing in that hall, she explained the rest. Her ship had been sabotaged by a rival house during a succession dispute, sent crashing across the void with her mind deliberately erased so that no one would ever know what happened to her, or who saved her, or that she owed her very existence to a species so young the rest of the galaxy had barely noticed us yet. For 6 years, fragments of memory had come back to her slowly, an image here, a feeling there, but never a face, never a name, until 3 days ago, when a routine trade report crossed her desk, mentioning a new delegate species called humanity, and one particular name attached to a diplomatic visa. My name. The moment she read it, the last locked door in her memory broke open, and she saw everything. The frozen moon, the thermal coat, the voice that stayed beside her in the dark and refused to let her die alone. She had ordered her fastest ship prepared within the hour and traveled across a significant stretch of the galaxy just to reach this Concord meeting in time, because she could not wait even one more day to say thank you. The hall stayed silent through the entire explanation. I could see faces changing around me, expressions shifting from confusion to shock, to something that almost looked like respect. The same delegates who would not glance in my direction an hour earlier were now staring at me like I had personally rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy. In a way, I had. The Queen turned from me to face the full assembly, still holding one of my hands, and her voice grew louder, steady now instead of shaking, carrying across every tier of that massive room. She declared, in front of every ambassador, general, and ruler present, that a life debt existed between her house and the people of Earth, a debt that predated our formal membership in this Concord, a debt older than most of the alliances currently sitting in that room. She announced that from this day forward, humanity would stand under the protection of her house, with full voting rights, full trade privileges, and a permanent seat at the highest tier of the assembly, not the lowest. The old rules said a species had to prove itself worthy over decades before earning that kind of status. She was rewriting those rules in front of everyone, using her own authority as the oldest ruling house in the galaxy, and not a single delegate in that hall dared object. I stood there, still holding her hand, completely unable to process what was happening. A few hours earlier, I had walked into that hall as an afterthought, a token representative from a species nobody expected much from. Now the most powerful person in the room was calling me the reason she was alive, in front of an audience that controlled trade routes and defense treaties spanning thousands of star systems. She turned back to me one last time before releasing my hand, and her expression softened into something quieter, more personal than a queen addressing her court. She said that she had spent 6 years feeling like half a person, missing a piece of her own story that nobody could return to her, and that the moment she remembered my face was the first time in years she had felt completely whole again. I finally found my voice and told her the truth, that I never expected anything in return for helping someone who needed it, that where I came from, you do not leave a person to die in the dark just because you do not understand who they are. She smiled at that, a real smile, and said that was exactly why her people would remember humanity, not for our weapons or our ships, but for a single choice made by one ordinary person on a frozen moon nobody else even knew existed. The horn sounded again, different this time, a rising note that I would later learn signaled the formal recognition of a new ally house within the Concord. Delegates from species I had never even heard of began approaching afterward, offering greetings, trade proposals, alliances, all because of what had just happened in front of them. I walked out of that hall hours later, as something completely different from what I had been when I walked in. Not a token, not an afterthought, something the entire galaxy would remember. And somewhere behind me, in a hall that had gone completely silent just to watch one queen run across a crowded room to reach me, I understood that the smallest choices we make, the ones we barely think twice about, sometimes echo far longer and far louder than we could ever imagine.